Hey everyone, welcome back. You know how much we love digging into these kind of under-the-radar stories, those places where change is happening so fast, it's almost hard to keep up.
It's exciting, right?
Definitely exciting, especially for anyone who's interested in, the global economy and maybe spotting those investment hotspots before they hit the mainstream.
Absolutely.
And today, we're diving deep, no pun intended, into one of those places. Cotonou, Benin. We've been looking at a lot of data lately, and it all points to the same thing. This place is experiencing a serious real estate boom.
A boom is putting it mildly. I mean, for anyone tracking emerging economies, Cotonou is painting a really compelling picture right now.
Okay, so let's break it down for everyone. What's making Cotonou's property market so hot right now? What's driving all this growth, and, why should people care?
Great questions. There's a lot to unpack here.
Well, let's start with the basics, right?
Okay.
The city itself, Cotonou's population is growing at an incredible rate.
It is. As of 2021, Cotonou had a population of about 1.2 million people. And the trend shows that number just keeps going up.
Right, so it's not just a little blip, it's a consistent upward trend. And I'm guessing it's not just from, people having babies.
You're right, it's not just natural population growth. A lot of this increase is due to migration.
Migration, so people are moving to Cotonou from somewhere else.
Exactly. People are moving to Cotonou from rural areas.
Okay, so what's the big draw? Why are people leaving the countryside and heading for the big city?
Well, this is something we see all over the world, this pattern of rural-urban migration. People move to urban centers because, well, they often see it as a path to a better life.
Makes sense. More opportunities, right?
Exactly. More opportunities, more jobs. And Cotonou, being Benin's main economic hub, is where all those opportunities are concentrated.
Right, so it's where the action is. More jobs, probably better education, and generally a better standard of living.
Right. And it's not just attracting people from within Benin either. Because it's the economic hub, it's also drawing in professionals from other countries.
Interesting. So you have this sort of double pressure, more people needing places to live, and more businesses needing space to operate, and that's pushing up the demand for real estate.
Precisely. More people, more businesses, more demand. It's a classic recipe for a real estate boom.
So we've got this rapidly expanding population, which makes sense, but there's more to it than that, right? Cotonou isn't just important within Benin, it also plays a key role regionally, especially when it comes to Nigeria.
You're absolutely right. Cotonou's proximity to Nigeria is a huge factor. And I don't just mean they share a border. I mean it has a massive impact on its economy, especially its real estate market.
Because Nigeria is, well, the economic powerhouse of Africa.
Exactly, the largest economy in Africa. And Cotonou is right there, perfectly positioned to benefit from that.
And we're talking about the Port of Cotonou here, right? It's a major gateway for goods flowing into the region.
You got it. The port of Cotonou is essential for Benin, obviously, but it's also a crucial entry point for goods destined for Nigeria and other landlocked countries in West Africa.
So it's like this vital artery pumping goods throughout the region. And all that trade creates a huge need for infrastructure. Warehouses, logistics centers, all that stuff.
Exactly. And those are all commercial properties, which further fuels the real estate demand.
But it's not just about, big ships and formal trade agreements, right? There's a whole other layer to this, the informal trade networks.
Oh, you're hitting on a really important point. The informal trade between Benin and Nigeria is huge, massive. And Cotonou, especially places like the Dantokba market, is at the heart of it all.
Dantokba market. I've seen pictures. It looks incredible. Just this bustling, vibrant marketplace.
It is. It's one of the largest open-air markets in West Africa. And that kind of informal trade creates its own demand for real estate.
I can see that. All those traders need places to store their goods, sell their products, all of that.
Exactly. So you have these two forces at play, the formal trade flowing through the port and the informal trade happening in places like Dantokba Market, both driving demand for different types of real estate.
So it's this really dynamic ecosystem with both large-scale and smaller-scale activities feeding into this real estate boom. Okay, so we've got this rapidly growing population, a strategic location for regional trade, and now let's talk about the investors. Because they're flocking to Cotonou, and for good reason. I mean, some of the reported returns on investment are pretty eye-popping.
It's exciting to see these kinds of returns, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that strong demand fueled by population growth and trade. It all leads to very favorable conditions for real estate investors.
Favorable is an understatement.
Yeah.
Reports suggest annual returns in Cotonou's real estate sector are somewhere between 15% to 20%. That's huge.
It is. And when you compare that to, more established markets, it's clear why Cotonou is attracting so much attention.
I mean, 15% to 20% annually, that's not something you see every day. What's driving those kinds of returns? Is it just this, like, perfect storm of factors we've been talking about?
It's a combination of things. High demand for property, but also in some areas, a relative scarcity of prime real estate. Those two things together naturally push property values up.
Basic supply and demand here.
Exactly. Plus, there's the potential for strong rental income. So you have property appreciation combined with rental income, and that's how you get those impressive ROI figures.
And it's not just a short-term trend, right? Forecasts suggest this growth in Benin's real estate market is likely to continue.
The projections are very promising. The residential real estate market in Benin is expected to grow by about 4.63% per year between 2025 and 2029.
That's significant.
It is. And by 2029, the market volume is projected to reach over $142 billion. So this isn't a flash in the pan, this is a long-term trend.
Which is really attractive for investors. They want to see that kind of stability and predictability. Now, of course, anytime you have rapid growth, there's always a bit of uncertainty. But it seems like the Beninese government has been actively working to make the real estate market more stable, more transparent.
You're right. The government has implemented some really important initiatives to make Benin more attractive to investors. And one of the most significant is the mandatory land title regulation that came into effect in August 2023.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't real estate experts, can you explain why that land title regulation is such a big deal?
It's about security and transparency. By making land titles mandatory for all real estate transactions, the government is making it much more difficult for property disputes to arise. It also protects the rights of investors, making it a much safer environment to put their money in.
It's all about reducing risk and uncertainty, which, again, is a huge draw for investors. And it's not just about land titles, right? There have been broader efforts to make Benin more attractive to foreign investment.
Absolutely. Benin has been working hard to attract what's called foreign direct investment. They've simplified procedures for registering businesses, offered tax incentives for real estate projects, and are investing in critical infrastructure.
All those things matter. Investors want to see that a government is committed to creating a stable and business-friendly environment.
Exactly. And speaking of infrastructure, that's another key piece of the puzzle. A growing city needs good infrastructure to function properly. Roads, utilities, all of that.
Makes sense. What's the situation like in Cotonou? Are those things keeping up with the rapid growth?
There's been a lot of progress. Investments in road networks, public transportation, and utilities like water and electricity are all improving. And that makes Cotonou a more attractive place to live and do business.
So when you put it all together, the population growth, the strategic trade location, the high returns for investors, the government's efforts to create a stable environment, and the improvements in infrastructure, Cotonou sounds like a really compelling opportunity. But how does it compare to other cities in the region? What gives it that competitive edge?
That's the million-dollar question for anyone thinking about investing. And honestly, Cotonou offers a unique combination of factors that you don't find everywhere in West Africa.
Okay, like what?
Well, Benin has enjoyed a period of political stability. That matters a lot to investors because it means predictable economic policies, less risk. Plus, even though property values are rising, Cotonou is still relatively affordable compared to, say, Lagos or Abidjan. So there's still a lot of room for growth.
So it's kind of like getting in on the ground floor, but with a lot of positive indicators already in place. It's not a sure thing, of course. No investment is.
Oh.
And the information we looked at did mention a couple of potential challenges.
Right. It's important to be aware of the potential downsides. Navigating the local regulatory environment can be tricky, so due diligence is absolutely essential.
Meaning investors need to do their homework, make sure they understand the rules and regulations before jumping in.
Exactly. Thorough research is key. And the other thing to keep in mind is the risk of oversupply. As the market heats up, there's always the chance that too much development will happen too quickly.
Which could lead to a correction, right? Prices going down.
Potentially, yes. So it's not just about getting in on the action, it's about being smart, doing your research, and picking the right projects.
Okay, so to sum up what we've learned, Cotonou's real estate boom is being driven by a few key factors. This massive influx of people seeking better opportunities, its strategic location for regional trade, especially with Nigeria, the potential for really high returns on investment, the government actively working to make Benin more investor-friendly, and ongoing infrastructure improvements. All of that combined makes Cotonou a really interesting place to watch. But of course, investors need to be aware of the challenges understanding the local regulations and the potential for oversupply.
You summed it up perfectly, and when you factor in those projected growth figures we talked about, Cotonou really does present a compelling opportunity for those looking to invest in high-growth emerging markets.
Absolutely. A residential market projected to be worth over $142 billion by 2029. That's not something to ignore.
Definitely not. And for me, this deep dive into Cotonou highlights something really important. It's a perfect example of how a combination of factors, urbanization, trade, government policies, and infrastructure development can create the perfect conditions for explosive growth. And I think it's a reminder that sometimes the best opportunities are found in those places that are still under the radar.
Well said. It makes you wonder what other unexpected great stories are out there waiting to be discovered. So for everyone listening, here's something to think about. Cotonou's success is tied to a few key things: its relationship with Nigeria, its growing population, and the government's efforts to attract investment. So thinking about that, what other under-the-radar economic hubs might be emerging across the African continent? What are the key indicators that we should be looking for to identify those places early on?
Great question. Lots to think about.
Exactly. There's a whole world of opportunity out there. You just have to know where to look. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.